Big things are moving fast at Starbase this week. Pad 1 is being torn apart piece by piece while Pad 2 is springing to life. With the version 3 Starship and Super Heavy being completed, we are already hearing official talk of that first flight timeline, and it is sooner than you might think. You want to stick around for the other launches too, such as the Bandwagon 4 mission, because from this came a whole bunch of very interesting stuff around orbital data centers and SpaceX leaning in harder for more commercial opportunities on the lunar surface. Buckle up, because it has been a busy week.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and let's kick off with the always exciting launch site at Starbase. We left you last week with the beginning of the destruction of the obsolete Pad 1 orbital launch mount, and if we compare some shots by Shaun here towards the end of the week, you can already see how much has been removed in such a short period of time. SpaceX made very quick work of getting the upper half of the outer shielding cut away, seen here thanks to Lab Padre. We believe that they've ripped into this area first to avoid needing to install a temporary railing around the mount to prevent falls. The lower half of the shielding still in place has instead filled this purpose. Now, the booster quick disconnect has also been stripped of its steel, removed all the way around. Dissecting it in this way lets them slice out smaller pieces to easily lower one at a time. You can see the main door being removed here thanks to NSF's live cameras on Wednesday afternoon, with larger pieces of the hood itself coming out shortly thereafter. That entire quick disconnect has been hoisted right out of there on Friday actually, so they are making short work of it all. From above, you can see the pile of scrap metal and pipes from what was being removed at the start of the week. These views from RGV aerial photography let us see this very clearly. Look at the berm wall to the north. Early in the week, all of its concrete was already broken up and moved off-site. However, instead of removing the dirt, it appears as though SpaceX have been using this to fill in the deluge runoff pond, which is also no longer needed in its current form. They've also been breaking out the concrete that surrounded the weir pipes that supply the deluge plate with that high pressure water supply. There were 2 concrete blocks surrounding these 90-degree elbows here last week. Huge changes are being made to the back of the tower too. The drawworks roof and the emergency access stairs were being cut out and removed this week. One side of the roof was being removed when this image was captured, but the other side was soon removed as well. Indeed, this whole area looks to be getting an overhaul, and we expect them to do a swap with the drawworks and the spool moving from there to here. Now, these are positioned this way already on all other towers. This is likely because having the active side of the drawworks hidden behind the tower offers additional protection. Likewise, I'm sure that this also means less maintenance. At the obsolete part of the tank farm, the oxygen and methane subcoolers with their top manifolds now removed were ready to move out. SpaceX began to roll these out from the oxygen side earlier in the week, and they ended up showing up in a parade one after the other at McGregor only a few days later. Now, as always, some fun updates around the new Pad 2. SpaceX has been installing covers on the vents here, and the gap between the bunker and the launch mount is now receiving cover plates. There is still quite a bit of scaffolding remaining on the top deck of the launch mount, however, that hasn't stopped them from running a brand new test that we have been waiting for. Yes, on Tuesday they had launched into their first purge of the top deck pancake system and the pipes that supply it with water. This test appeared to just be high pressure gas producing quite the dirty cloud there. They also tested the buckets the next day, but this was done with water like we would expect. The long-awaited ship quick disconnect arm for Tower 2 has had recent focus again, and it seems to be getting these swivel joints installed onto the main hinge. We're not really sure what's going on with the end piece. Perhaps SpaceX is constructing it somewhere hidden away on site. All we know is that we don't have one here, and there isn't one at Florida either. I suspect we may just see it delivered fully constructed at some point soon. Speaking of deliveries in Florida though, this week we had a huge development with the launch mount previously being constructed at the Roberts Road facility rolling out here on Tuesday morning. Great views of this as it's travelled down Kennedy Parkway past the vehicle assembly building and down to 39A, where they quickly got to hooking it up to the LR13000 crane to lift it into place the next day. Now, it has been a while since we've updated you on the new air separation unit installation. Well, check this out. This week we can see deliveries of glass gravel rolling in to be emptied into the walls here. This looks to be there to help insulate any of the commodities lines that runs through towards the launch site. With that, the pile driller has returned. That is because we can now see these rebar cages laying on the ground nearby, clearly awaiting installation. Well, that has already started as seen here on Thursday. SpaceX typically stores hardware down at the port, and we can see a lot staged here that looks quite similar to that which may be installed in an air separation unit, so we'll keep an eye on all of this. Over at the production site, there's been a lot of great movement this week to update you on. If we start over here at the Sanchez entrance, we can see that the stand here is a version 2 stand. Now, this will be having modifications to upgrade it to be compatible with the version 3 boosters. Right beside it is what appears to be the very first version 3 ship transport stand. This indeed looks like it will be identical or close to identical to the one that we had seen in the Gigabay model released by SpaceX. Within the scrapyard this week, they've been ripping into the old test Tank 16 with it now being reduced to a barrel and dome. The ship's static fire ring here also seems to be meeting its fate like the rest of the version 2 ship stands, SpaceX obviously not needing that anymore either. Over to the bays, work has begun to pick up on the Gigabay with steel columns now going up on the right side. Both tower cranes now appear to be operational on this side, and we could even see them lifting multiple pieces at a time, sometimes as many as 5. That's efficient. The 2 tower cranes on the left are approaching completion as well, so by next week's video we should see them all in action. In Megabay 2, it was a busy week for Ship 39, the first version 3 ship. Right after our last video, SpaceX had rolled out and stacked the 5th section of the ship, and just a few days later on Tuesday, the 6th was stacked too. Now, they are doing a great job at getting the pins and tiles installed on the sections between barrels. That is quite unlike previous ships where they completed the heat shield almost always after the ship was fully stacked. The next step for Ship 39 was of course to get its internal transfer tubes. These were installed into the jib inside the Star Factory, and here they were rolling out and heading into Megabay 2 Thursday morning. You can see the central transfer tube that feeds the 3 gimbaling Raptors with methane, as well as the 3 tubes feeding each of the 3 Raptor vacuums. Just like we had with version 2, they also have another one, which is the transfer tube feeding the center Raptors with liquid oxygen from the header tank in the nose cone. The methane tube from the header tank simply connects to that already mentioned central transfer tube. So yeah, Ship 39 was then soon lifted over the stand and the crew got to work integrating it all. Once they've finished getting all that sorted, that only leaves the last and final section of the version 3 ship, the aft section, and although we saw this one roll out, this looks instead to be an aft test article. The other main section for this was also staged outside Megabay 2, and thanks to Starship Gazer, we have a very good view here of what a version 3 ship quick disconnect looks like. So with all of that, good news this week for the first version 3 Super Heavy too. On Wednesday, we had seen the same stand that was used to stack the version 3 radial tank head into Megabay 1. It's likely that this stand was used to station the methane tank of Booster 18 into the middle of the bay while they swapped the bridge cranes. In the past, this was done with this black stand here, but it's possible that they want to use a single stand for multiple stacking operations. Later in the day, crew were in the lifts right in the top left-hand corner of the bay, and this would be right up around the methane tank, so this means that likely at this time we have our first fully stacked version 3 Super Heavy. So the big question that I know you all have is, when are we likely to see this version 3 fly? Well, at this year's annual Space Economy Summit in Orlando, it was reported by Jeff Faust that SpaceX's VP of Launch mentioned that the first Starship version 3 launch could take place as soon as January. Given how fast we seem to be moving here now, although optimistic, it is great to have a rough idea. It sure is a wild ride watching all this happen in such a short period of time. Shaun has been having a blast out there picking all this up, and I love that we get to share this with you every week. Thanks, as always, for liking the videos and being subscribed so we get to keep doing it. Now, along with those insights from SpaceX's VP of Launch, it was also said that a booster will be rolling out to the pad for tests in days to weeks. So yeah, how exciting is that? What exact pad is meant here though isn't clear. Booster 18 is next in line obviously, and that still needs to undergo cryogenic proof tests. For previous boosters, these have been performed at Massey's, and they certainly do have an upgraded version 3 structural test stand that they can use for boosters here, so I suspect by pad we are talking about Massey's rather than pad 2. Okay, so this week at Massey's, work continues getting everything prepared for the first full-scale version 3 vehicles to arrive. Before we jump into that though, big shout out to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. If you've ever wondered how those annoying phone calls and sketchy emails find you, it's because data brokers are out there constantly collecting and selling your personal information. What they do is crawl the web searching for data and use it to build a profile on you, and they find this from public records, self-reported information, social media, and obviously just from other data brokers. It's not just annoying, it's a real privacy risk, especially if the scammers get their hands on it. That's where Delete Me comes in. After signing up to test it out close to 2 years ago now, I haven't looked back. They found a bucket load of my information while skimming over hundreds of data broker databases and then wiped it out. The important point though is that those data brokers are not just sitting by. They are constantly trying to snap up what they can repeatedly, and your data could end up back on those various databases quicker than you would expect. Well, Delete Me doesn't just clean up once either. They keep protecting you over time, scanning frequently and cleaning up any new occurrences. This recent Wirecutter article here documented their experience testing out 9 different surfaces, and it was clear to them that Delete Me made the best choice for most people, so they gave it the top pick. Delete Me have also taken it up a notch with the brand new features recently released that lets you protect your entire family under the one account. Whether it is your parents, siblings, or even your grandparents, everybody gets the same level of security. You can manage the privacy settings easily from one place, assigning unique settings to each family member based on their needs. So if you are ready to take control of your privacy, give it a try using my link, joindeleteme.com/Marcus for a 20% discount on US consumer plans. You can also find the URL in the description for international plans too. Thank you, Delete Me. Okay, so back to Massey's. We should soon see the full-scale version 3 vehicles out here very soon, potentially within a matter of weeks given that all sections of the first version 3 booster are inside Mega Bay 1 and the first version 3 ship only being one section shy from completion. First, SpaceX needs to pick up all the data that they can out of their subscale test articles, and this week we can see workers have begun disconnecting some of the pistons from this test tank currently sitting in the larger can crusher. Is this a sign that they've now done all of the testing that they want to replace it with the B18.3 sitting beside it? Nearby is the new blue can crusher cap that began its assembly last week. It's not yet known whether this cap has any differences to the first sitting on this test tank or if the clamping interfaces are different to those needed to support the new version 3 hot stage ring on the B18.3 tank. At the commodities bunker, this week we can see workers have installed an insane amount of rebar for the roof. While being what looks to be almost a metre thick, it should be extremely resilient to any damage. The cryo pipes exiting the bunker towards the static fire stand are receiving their own protection as well, with these steel boxes placed. Vertical pipes are being installed up the side of the ship quick disconnect to get these two connected, and a lip was added to the front which will likely mean easier access to the ship quick disconnect during the connections. Taking a closer look at the static fire stand, which has been coming together quickly the last couple of weeks, we can see it has all 6 hold down clamps installed and the shielding to close the gap between the bottom of the ship and the stand. All that's left is some vacuum-wrapped bracing support, and this stand should be ready to resume its job. You may have spotted this nearby too. Groundwork has started this week to replace the engine chill pit now that the area isn't full of scrap metal. We could actually see SpaceX installing these pipes here during the flyover. Now we finally have an official update on the NASA administrator. Yes, as we found out midweek, Jared Isaacman has indeed been nominated once more for this role. As I'm sure you are aware, Shaun Duffy had been placed in the acting role temporarily after Jared's nomination had been pulled. Since then, of course, it's been a bizarre spectacle. I'm not going to go back into all that again, but needless to say, Jared has a vastly different vision for NASA. Despite initial fears that could literally rip NASA apart with suggestions at one point that it could be rolled into the Department of Transportation, we should now see a much more inspiring outcome, and this, in my opinion, is all very good news. The nomination still needs to be finalised, of course, but at this point it seems like a sure thing, although admittedly it sort of did before too, so fingers crossed. Now, we had loads of space flights. On Sunday, SpaceX were preparing for a big mission from Space Launch Complex 40 for their latest rideshare, Bandwagon 4. Now, this was an exciting one due to the bunch of interesting payloads on board. It was booster 1091 sending them skyward and only flight number 3 for this Falcon 9 first stage. Separation there, and rather than seeing the fairing jettison, we were instead watching the wonderful view of the boost backburn with that twilight spectacle forming what looked just like a short-lived nebula in the Florida sky. Unreal ground camera views of all of this in the livestream. Indeed, this was another less common return to launch site mission. A couple of minutes later, there was the booster making its way to touchdown on landing zone 2 in the darkness. Now, the second stage was taking 18 payloads on their way to their designated orbits. In these bandwagon missions, SpaceX is sending these satellites into a mid-inclination orbit. Comparing this to sun-synchronous orbits used for transporter rideshare missions is always interesting, and there are advantages for each orbit type depending on the individual mission. Mid-inclination orbits offer a much higher number of revisits over a specific region. This is especially useful with Earth observation missions where you may want to gather frequent data from one area for something like weather forecasting, just as one example. We didn't get to see the deployment of CoreSat 4 early on due to some customer restrictions, but more intriguing spacecraft were to come anyway. The Merlin vacuum engine needed to fire up for just a second right before the 38-minute mark, and another similar 1-second burn about 20 minutes later. 2 tiny changes needed there to slightly adjust the orbit from what was needed for CoreSat 4. Now it was time to deploy the remaining 17 satellites. Now, it was incredible to see Vast's Haven demo spacecraft separate away and then later watch it deploy. I've been talking about the steps needed for Haven 1 since we first learned about it, but this demo spacecraft alone is a stunning milestone. Vast shared these breathtaking views of the solar panel deployment in glorious 4K. This is some of the best footage that I've seen from orbit this year. This demo mission is to demonstrate a lot of the hardware that will be included on that space station. Now, these solar panels are the same that will be used, and Haven 1 will have 12 similar ones. This is why this demo mission is a very crucial step for Vast. It'll allow them to test their technology in space, not just solar panels, but all other critical hardware like the onboard computers, power, battery, software, guidance and control, propulsion, and communication systems. It all needs to be tested. It's also using Impulse Space's thrusters, which will be a subset of Haven 1's propulsion system. Meanwhile, Haven 1's primary flight structure has passed all of its load and stress tests last month. Along with final weld inspections after that testing, it is having the internals integrated with life support systems, power, thermal control, and propulsion systems as well. So I really hope we get to see a lot more video and images of this whole process. Vast still seems to be looking good for the Haven 1 mission to kick off in mid-2026. Now, the other payload on this rideshare mission that made the big headlines was StarCloud-1, which includes an NVIDIA H100 GPU. This 60-kilogram StarCloud-1 satellite is about the size of a small fridge, and when I reached out to Philip Johnston, the co-founder and CEO of StarCloud, he was stoked with the success that they had seen so far in this mission. This is groundbreaking because this GPU is around 100 times more powerful than any other space-based operation in terms of compute capability. The grand plan is that StarCloud wants to build orbital data centers at a massive scale in space. Rather than soak up valuable real estate and power generation resources on the ground, the idea is that the uninterrupted high-intensity solar energy in space provides endless power. The dream here is to build a 5-gigawatt orbital data center with monstrous solar and cooling panels, approximately 4 kilometers in width and length. At first, when I was learning about this, the idea seemed almost absurd to me, but as the weeks have ticked by, we're seeing a massive push now from gigantic companies like NVIDIA directly. This is no joke. Not only would this be bigger than anything that we have ever built in space before, they think that the abundant solar energy, vacuum cooling, and scalability will be the future. After all, terrestrial data centers are facing increasing constraints given the energy demand that they require. This all comes with gigantic challenges, of course. We need that Starship dream of low-cost mass to orbit for this to be even close to viable, and the technology needs to survive the harsh environments of space, including energetic radiation and the odd micrometeoroid impact here and there. Not only that, they need to prove that they can collect the gigantic amount of solar power needed, but adequately radiate all that waste heat away. I wondered if instead of something like this, we would expect to see more of a set of modules that have their own solar and cooling integrated. If assembled autonomously, this actually could be a way to solve many of the challenges with this idea. Well, it appears that StarCloud and Rendezvous Robotics have formed an agreement to explore just this concept. This would provide a lot of redundancy if any individual module was damaged. Otherwise, one well-placed impact could sever a very important part of this ginormous structure. It is all very early days yet, so we'll be watching closely to see how this concept evolves. Of course, we then had this post jumping onto the train when it comes to space-based computing. Elon said that Starlink version 3 satellites could be scaled up. With high-speed laser links and planned terabit per second capacity, if they simply used excess capability from all individual Starlink satellites in the network, that could generate a lot of added revenue. After all, there would be a bunch of time that Starlink satellites may be outside populated areas with plenty of free resources to start chewing away at a computational problem. The other thought that Starship could deliver 100 gigawatts of capability per year into a high Earth orbit is also interesting. This could take 4 to 5 years to set up, but is intriguing by itself. But want to look even further down the track? How about a lunar base that can produce solar-powered AI satellites and then have them fired into space with a mass driver? Well, if we had a thriving economy that invested heavily into this idea, 100 terawatts per year is the estimate. Yes, it is no longer just Mars that seems to be the focus. SpaceX is leaning in big on the moon. In a post-frenzy about all of this during the week, it seems like Elon even has thoughts around quantum computing. Given the super cold temperatures required for this, would there be a big benefit doing this in the permanently shadowed craters? All I know is that it is very exciting to see plans for the moon that would mean gigantic investment coming from the absurdly wealthy companies that dwarf the funding that comes from government projects. Now, along with all that, there was plenty more launch action. Another batch of 29 Starlink satellites here launched with Group 681 from Slick 40 on Wednesday evening. Yes, that is the third ever set with 29. As I've found out since last week, thanks to some messages with Michael Nichols, the VP of Starlink Engineering, this is because of lower mass of the vehicle and the dispense system. So yeah, we should be seeing 29 launching more frequently now. Just read the instructions was waiting downrange for booster 1094 and landing number 5 for another young one to the fleet. Starlink Group 1114 was off on Thursday afternoon from Vandenberg Space Force Base, but that was again with a set of 28. Interestingly though, after this launch, an emergency order announced by the FAA has banned commercial launches and re-entries between 6 AM and 10 PM starting on Monday, so we may see some unfortunate rescheduling coming. I'm interested to see what happens with New Glenn. That I don't believe is classified as a commercial launch, so it may not be affected by this, but yeah, it is still, I believe, scheduled to fly on Sunday afternoon if that holds. This emergency order all seems largely due to the current government shutdown related issues based on what Shaun posted out here. Anyway, there was another week of Falcon 9 wrapped up with yet another touchdown on Of Course I Still Love You. That's the 8th landing there for booster 1093. Ariane 6 was also away early in the week from French Guiana on its 4th ever flight, and this was taking the Sentinel-1D to orbit to join the constellation. This time it flew with the 2 solid rocket motor configuration and deployed the satellite 34 minutes after launch. We even got to see an Electron back in the air with Rocket Lab's 5th Electron launch for IQPS. It was a gorgeous view of liftoff there from New Zealand, not a cloud in the sky as it rocketed away for the 16th mission for the year. Awesome shot of the stage separation too, followed by the Rutherford engine firing up. They really have all this pretty routine these days. Fairing separation gave us a view of the satellite, and that was deployed by the kick stage around the 50-minute mark. ISRO was also back at their second launch pad with their most powerful rocket, the LVM-3, lifting off on a mission to take up the next communication satellite for the Indian Navy. This weighs in at 4.4 tons and was the heaviest ComSat to be launched into a geosynchronous transfer orbit from India. The core stage there between the solid rocket boosters ignited a little over a minute and a half into the flight, and we soon had the solid rocket motors separating away. This beast last launched a year ago with the historic Chandrayaan-3 mission, sending the Vikram lander to the lunar South Pole. Everything here went perfectly again. The core L110 stage separated away, and the third and final stage had ignited a little over 5 minutes in. Before we knew it, the CMS-03 satellite was deployed. So that is it for the week, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe to help us keep doing what we do. Couldn't do it without you, in fact. If you want to continue with more space goodness, check out this video right here. Thanks as always for watching. I will see you all in the next video.